Dynamo Podcast Network.
Welcome to the four Podmen once again, and finally we are on YouTube. And for all of you beautiful guys and gals out there, you finally get to see our beautiful, maybe not so beautiful faces. But today is a really, really special show. I am your host, Ian the Dynamo Kelly. I am joined once again, as always, by Niall the Shopkeeper Hogan and Jason the DJ Kennedy. And our very, very special guest today on the Four Podmen, my friend and yours, Powerslam's own Mr. Findlay Martin. So welcome to the show, firstly, Findlay, as you are the guest of honor. How are you, my friend?
You. I'm very well. Thanks for having me. How are you, by the way? And how is everybody else?
We're all good. Why don't you take over, Niall and Jay? Let's all. It's a family here now.
Yeah, it's all good. A pleasure to have Findlay on as well. Such an influence on our love of wrestling through the Powerslam magazines back in the day and everything. So it's great to have you on, Findlay.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolute honor as well. You know, there was a staple of my 20s. I had two things that I had to do weekly every Wednesday. One was collect me dole and two was collect me Powerslam. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I only missed one of those two things because I went up and got me dole today, even though it's Tuesday, you know. So you were very, 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 that magazine was very important to maintaining my love of wrestling for a long time when I was in the dark television-wise.
Well, you know, the pleasure was all yours, wasn't it?
It absolutely was.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the lifestyle I have today. I'm obviously very well.
Can I have me dole money back?
No, in all seriousness, in all sincerity, yes. Thanks very much for buying the magazine back in the day. Yeah, I really do appreciate it.
I'm only giving him a get out of jail free card is because I've been friends with him for 2 years and I've been waiting that invite to Lancashire here, and it's only because of the pandemic that I'm letting him away with this. To be fair, but no. So Findlay, you're obviously you've been on previous shows before for the Dynamo Podcast Network on Dynamo's Dozen, and today it's something a little bit different because you know what we do with the four podmen here. We kind of take and for anybody out there that's watching us on YouTube for the first time, we take a moment in time or a particular person or whatever it may be in wrestling, and we just do a deep dive on it, and we kind of spitball it. We basically shoot the shit and we have fun with it, and we hope you guys sit back and have fun with it too. And what I would recommend before any of you watch any further, you take a good cold beer or a glass of wine or whatever it is that you do, and you join us and you have a beer with us, because that's what we do. And we like to have a relaxing show here. And being the guest of honor that Finn is, he came up with some interesting discussion topics for us today, and we're going to do it in segments. Being that it is War Game season and we're just off the back of War Games with NXT, we decided that we would take a look at some of our favorite War Games matches and moments. And also, we thought as well, because it is Gimmick season, because TLC is next, we said we'd look at our favorite Gimmick matches also. And then to finish off, we're going to actually take a step back and come into the modern era, because what we do is we go old school on these shows. But we're going to take a look at Roman Reigns and the evolution of Roman Reigns and where he is now, character-wise. And, of course, is the topic of discussion going to be, are we dealing with a real life superstar here? And I think that's something that's a very, very interesting topic. So really good choices by Finn. And I think, without further ado, we should get straight into it. War Games. We're not going to spend too much time on, a review of the War Games that was on the other night. That's for other people to talk about.
And we both spent enough time watching it.
There you go. There you go. Exactly. And of course, Finn, if you want to actually we'll do that at the end. We'll do that at the end. We'll do all the plugs and stuff. I suppose, Finn, you should probably start off. Your favorite War Games matches, or moments, or whatever you have for us, because we're ready for it. We don't know what you're going to hit with us, so I'm ready.
Well, I mean, the first one I saw would have been the first War Games, which was Four Horsemen versus Dusty's team, which was 87 on the Bash Tour, July 87. And I'd read about this in wrestling magazines, the old American ones that were around then, and seen the photos of it. And it looked like the most amazing match that had ever taken place. And I've got to say, when I finally saw a copy of it on old VHS, I was a little bit disappointed, if I'm honest. It just didn't quite measure up to the hype or the expectations. Obviously, back in the day, wrestling magazines in the 80s, they weren't, they had an agenda, shall we say. They weren't exactly 100% objective, but there again, are any of us. But, it was a different era for wrestling magazines. So they really put it over as being the most amazingly violent and exciting and dramatic match ever. And it really wasn't. It was good, but not that good. I think probably the one that I saw after that really impressed me was the one at the Great American Bash 1989. And that pitted the Road Warriors, Midnight Express, and Steve Dr. Death Williams against the Fabulous Freebirds, who at that point they were Michael Hayes, Jimmy Garvin, and Terry Gordy, and the Samoan SWAT team, who were Fatu and Samu. Interestingly, the Midnight Express were baby faces, and they were managed, of course, by Jim Cornette. That was on one side. And the Samoan SWAT team, they were the villains, of course, and they were managed by Paul E. Dangerously. So that was quite interesting as well. Now, as I recall, this was a bloodless match. The July 87 one, I don't know how many people, did the swordsmanship that night, but it was a lot. Lex Luger obviously didn't. He was never into doing that. But I mean, it was a bloodbath. Whereas the Great American Bash 1989 one, I don't think there was any blood at all in that. Nevertheless, it was still so exciting. Such a tight match. Featured the famous shot of Steve Williams military pressing Terry Gordy, who was no small man, into the War Games roof again and again and again. And that was just like tore the house down. It was like a 22-minute match, really tight. There was no flab at all, no bloatedness there. And the fans were so into it. And I just remember thinking it was like, it was the match that I thought the 1987 match would be. This lived up to all of the hype, all of the expectations. I remember getting, the VHS of Great American Bash 1989, which was such an amazing show. There was that, Ric Flair, Terry Funk on top. And also Sting versus Great Muta was another amazing match on that show.
Amazing match, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen that show, I would highly recommend it. And the War Games is one that is well worth tracking down.
Yeah, I concur. That's one of my favorite pay-per-views in general of all time. I would 100% agree. For all you young kids out there that think, whatever AEW pay-per-view came out the last time, if you think that's a great pay-per-view, go check that out. That's a pay-per-view.
I mean, even like the Steiners versus Varsity Club, even that was like a tornado match where all four men fought at once. That was really good. Brian Pillman versus Bill Irwin. I mean, it was just an undercard match, but it was decent. You could see that Brian Pillman was going to be a star of the future. I mean, I'm not saying it was all killer, no filler, because there was probably a few matches on there, like actually Cornette and Dangerously squared off in a tuxedo match. Remember when they went through a phase of doing those?
Yes.
So that was like a silly comedy match. But I mean, overall, an amazing show, and the War Games on there is, superb.
But even that kind of exchange between Cornette and Paulie, it was still better than what you see most of the time now. You know what I mean? Because you don't see that anymore. Managers have to look sexy, and they just stand outside and they pander to the crowd, and nowadays they're not even pandering to anything other than the reflection in the plexiglass that they're looking over to. So this was real heel working when managers meant something. Managers had an influence. People bought into the fact that a manager could change, the outcome of a match, especially with a phone call on that big cell phone that Paul Lee had. That was some major connection he had. I still want that. Jay wants that.
Jay probably has it. He tried the podcast on it tonight.
But what about you, Niall? Why don't you chime in there with some of your favorite moments? Because we'll do it bit by bit.
Yeah, well, I was slightly different because at that stage I was really deep in NWA at the time and stuff like that. It only really come onto our screens here in Europe. Through, I think it was the old Screen Sport or Super Sport or something like that they used to show back in the day on the cable. And I was intrigued by the whole concept of the match. But I was also intrigued, like the build up to that 87 one was, you remember when Dusty had been sort of screwed over and then he came in and they formed this superpowers. And if you remember, you guys wouldn't remember, but myself and Findlay probably remember, back at that time, there was a big deal about this whole superpower thing. And I think if my memory serves me right, you had Reagan and it was like Thatcher and it was whoever it was in Russia, probably Gorbachev at the time, I'd say, or something like that. And this was a big thing. And they were going through this thing about, you'd hear it on the news nearly every night, who's going to be the one to push the button for the nuclear warheads. It was a big thing then, this whole superpower thing. And it was massive at the time when Nikita changed and went with Dusty. So I remember that. But I kind of enjoyed it because it was kind of like, I always loved to see JJ Dillon get his up and comings, that kind of way. It just, and like that one was really horrific, really, even though we talk about it's terrible to even see it on screen. And I always remember the time when Sting attacked him when it was Ric Flair Appreciation Night at Rally as well. Remember he Stinger splashed him and then he dived out of the ring. The four guys were chasing him to kill him and then Flair had the absolute epileptic fit in the ring at David Crockett. I won't be on your show anymore unless you sign the contract, Sting, and all this. And it was kind of like that. So
was that was. Did Dillon chuck a glass of champagne in Sting's face?
Yeah, it was Ric Flair Appreciation Night. Did all the girls and the champagne and like he was calling Rick out. He had a nothing match really. Called Rick out and of course JJ went up and threw the champagne in his face and Sting kind of backed off, wiped his face and all. But it was all that. So I always loved. That's just a bit of background. I always loved JJ getting his up and comings. And then it was interesting. Then in night 3, then he was replaced by Bossman. So it was an interesting kind of angle. And I also liked the angle as well where, they included the managers in the match. It was kind of like that payback to the build-up, So at the time, I mean, I was young at the time, but it was always intriguing, I get where you're coming from, Findlay, as well. And now looking back at it, sometimes it doesn't hold that kind of value. But when I go back and I look at these things for podcasts, I sort of teleport myself back into that childhood again. And I was always a huge Dusty Rhodes fan, you know what I mean? Because he was kind of always the guy who got screwed over, you know what I mean? And
He was always the victim. He always had an excuse, didn't he?
Always the victim.
Yeah. I always think those matches, the heat, in many ways, carried the match.
Yeah, big time, yeah.
And I think
he was so beloved, like.
It's funny listening to you guys talk about that because me being the baby of the podcast here, and Jay and Niall and you, Finn, you know this as well. That's my favorite wrestling, to go back to wrestling, even even though I didn't see it at the time, I knew it happened. I was still alive. I just didn't know what was happening. It's my favorite stuff to go back to because it makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love being able to look at workers that know what to do when it makes sense. And of course, it only became sense to me when I was like 18 years of age. I mean, when I was 18 years old, it was like a case of like, I'm not just going to keep watching it. I'm going to just throw myself into it. I'm going to go over to the UK, thanks to Powerslam magazine, by the way, and get my ass kicked around by Andre Baker in NWA Hammerlock.
Right.
And,
right.
It's your fault, Findlay. It's your fault. It was in your magazine.
You're right.
But it was crazy because you could go back and look at that stuff. And like I said, what Niall was saying and what you were saying there, every single thing on those shows made sense. It had a purpose. Sure, in today's eyes, it might look a little bit hokey or it might look a little bit contrived, but at the same time, doesn't today's stuff also look hokey and contrived?
Yeah, of course it does.
Jay,
I don't know. Yeah, I absolutely do. You see, this is an interesting subject for me. Right here, I'm the novice in a sea of sharks. I've said I've only watched maybe 3 or 4 War Games matches over the years because when I was coming up, it just wasn't a televised thing. And again, I wasn't reading the magazine. So, I mean, I was late to the show compared to you, man. But I'm trying to watch it. First of all, I can't believe, Hot Tag, that you're a Dusty Rhodes fan. I shouldn't have to find out this way, and I'm a little bit disappointed in you. Secondly, when I watch a War Games match, I'm trying to understand and process what I'm seeing. It seems like it's this massive celebration of wrestling from the glory days of the Super Gimmick. It's like 4 or 5 different formats mashed into one match. And what was frustrating me was, if I had seen that as a child, my mind would have been blown. There would have been so much happening. I think the analogy would be, it'd be like a 3-ring circus where there's loads of things happening at the same time and you don't know what to be watching and the cameraman doesn't know what to be following. But as an adult, as somebody who's kind of backtracking and reviewing and watching stuff from the past, I kind of get frustrated that I can't have more of what I'm seeing match-wise, if you know what I mean. Like, I mean, the last War Games that I watched tonight, just before we hopped on, was it 92, Ian?
1992, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, man, my fucking mind was blown. I mean, even at the age of 41, I'm sitting there going, there is the best cut Rick Rude I've ever seen in my life. He's fighting a pre-Stone Cold Steve Austin, and then every 2 minutes, Paulie is sending somebody else in, like some kind of coach. And I could see the reason and the format and how it could be sensational to watch. You've got these 2 ring generals in management either side of each other with these chess pieces that they're moving against each other in this kind of cerebral outside the ring context, whereas the men inside are just beating the living shit out of each other, hold for hold, move for move, doing tiny little mini spots, hoping that their floating camera is getting whatever they're doing, all at the same time, all over the place. There's so much happening. I'm like, give me 15 minutes of those 2 together, and then give me 20 minutes of those 2, and then I want him over here fighting him over him. And I don't know, as an adult, I'm like, I want more of what I'm seeing. This isn't enough. This is just a taster, do you know?
Yeah, I'd agree, Jay, because it's funny. That was a nice little segue, actually, because my favorite, like, War Games, without a shadow of a doubt, was Wrestle War 92, Sting Squadron.
Dustin Runnels and everything, or Dustin Rhodes in there and everything, taking care of business. You got Barry Windham. I mean, it's an all-star cast in 20 minutes.
Steamboat, you know, Nikita Koloff. I mean, that little
Nikita Koloff talking to Sting in the middle of the ring. Sorry, I marked out totally for the whole thing. Sorry.
That was a great spot as well. Even just the 2 of them in the ring, and then they duck, and it's like they go for the big hug. It's like, wow, how has this happened? I mean, I believe that. And you know what? Apparently, even Uncle Dave fucking Meltzer gave that 5 stars. Imagine.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, back in the day. So that's telling you something.
I mean,
Findlay
but what a high
went.
spot! Sting and Nikita Koloff, hug, and that's the high spot. Nowadays we've got a million dives and don't get a reaction that did. A hug.
Yeah.
You can really see where Dave Meltzer was coming from now when you look at it. When you look back, can't you?
Well, that's the thing about that era. They walked you through the cerebral situations with your intelligence, as opposed to now. I find they compromise your ability to understand by just throwing all of the shit at the wall and hoping something will stick. And I don't know.
What about beautiful Bobby Eaton trying to, the commentator Jim Ross is trying to kind of sell the narrative that beautiful Bobby Eaton is trying to put the turnbuckle back in place, but he's not really. And then, of course, the living legend Larry Zbyszko comes and takes it, and he hits him on the arm, and Sting wins with literally an armbar. I mean, but again, doesn't that make sense?
It does.
It makes sense.
He's just got hit with it. Yeah, exactly. Massive, great metal hook. You could have a broken arm. So of course you're going to submit to an armbar. I mean, an armbar's supposed to hurt, isn't it? I mean, how difficult is this?
I mean, it's a really simple. You know what? I believe it's like when people talk about football. Football is a simple sport made difficult by idiots, and it's the same with pro wrestling. It's a very, very simple psychology made made complicated by idiots, and listen, if you have exterior and exceptional levels of skill, like some of the guys that are around today, like a Kenny Omega or whatever you want to mention, nobody doubts these skill sets, but that's the simple process of I mean, how many, like Kenny Omega is a good example, okay? And we can look at the War Games later. I think Kenny Omega is a phenomenal wrestler. I've told you that before, Findlay. I think he's phenomenal at what he can do. However, he doesn't want to listen to someone like a Jim Cornette telling you, listen, if you slow down and you slow your shit down, you're going to look a whole lot better. Because one of those knees that you do, one of those flying knees, whatever they're called,
V triggers,
right? One of them should knock you the fuck out.
He should.
Yeah, but this is the patronizing of skill and intelligence level of the viewers. This is it should be, when it's done right, it should equate Shakespeare as an athletic performance, not National Lampoons. Don't patronize my intelligence. Do you know what I mean? Tell me a story. Don't laugh at me and just murder everybody in the first scene.
But it seems like the audience are now like, yes, laugh at me. I know what wrestling is.
Stand on the shoulder of giants.
But the thing about it is, if they do slow it down, then they have to do less, and they'll probably have a much longer career.
Yeah, they probably have to act as well. They actually have to put a little bit of themselves into their performance as opposed to dazzling us with high spots, which
You
is...
don't have to just do that.
Yeah, it is weird, isn't it? Because, I mean, if they were to do less and sell it more, then it would get over to a degree or extent, and then they would have longer careers and be in less pain the next day. I mean, it is kind of bizarre, isn't it? It's like saying, right, I've been hired to work 4 hours today, and I'm going to be paid for 4 hours, but I'm going to work 8, even though I'm not paid for those other 4 because, hey, why not? And I'm all about self-loathing. I want to punish myself. I don't know. It's bizarre, isn't it?
You've got kind of people as well. Like, I mean, you look at in NXT, for example, which we're all in our own way. We're a fan of certain NXT elements. Some of their matches at the moment are phenomenal. We talked about this on the other show, on Dynamo's Dozen, Findlay, with Finn Balor's last match.
Oh, and with Kyle O'Reilly,
Yeah. And he had a great match. And then Kyle O'Reilly, of course, can't hold the kick in and ends up, breaking his jaw or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's like, if you break a man's jaw in a wrestling match, all right, no matter how good that wrestling match is up until that point, if you decide to go and kick a man who was giving you his face, if you decide to break his jaw, whether intentional or not, but if you do not have the possess the panache to pull that kick,
yeah,
you are not a great pro wrestler, my friend. I'm sorry.
He was carrying it. He carried the second injury out of that match as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
I think I heard somewhere.
Then the current crowd of experts then decide, oh, Finn Balor, no wonder Vince doesn't put the belt on him because sure, he's injury prone. How can you be? Anybody's going to be injury prone when they get a kick in the jaw.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, that's right. I mean, and if you can't do that safely, you shouldn't really be doing it at all. I mean, Kyle O'Reilly's defense, it's hard to defend him, but I can't think of too many matches he's been in where he's injured people prior to that.
No, I think he got excited. And that's, and I'll defend him too. I will defend him too.
It was a hell of a match, and both of them were in it, in fairness.
I am going to use that. I am going to use that exact point to kind of say that it's not a case that I'm picking on that on Kyle himself. I'm not at all. I'm just saying it is one of those things that you should be aware of. I mean, you can look at the greatest of all time. They didn't injure people with silly mistakes like that, no matter how excited they got.
That's true. That's true. I mean, the thing is, I think it all boils down to this acceleration of pro wrestling and this desire to do more and more and more. And as you up the ante and you increase the risk level, then that also increases the likelihood that people are going to suffer injuries. I mean, it's inevitable, isn't it, really? It stands to reason. So,
yeah.
They could, unfortunately, they can't all be like Dynamite Kid nowadays. You know what I mean? Because, and I mean that in the sense that, like, back in the day, they had a lot of help to get them over their injury for the next day. And nowadays, you can't really do that sort of help.
True. That's
you
true.
know?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, that is very true.
Yeah. So
I think unfortunately a lot of them are looking at the high impact style of Dynamite Kid, and that could be a problem as well. Dynamite never hurt anybody else, but Jesus Christ, he had to hurt himself doing that style at that time when everybody else is doing, alas Prioric soliloquies with 15 minutes and one punch, and that guy's just smashing records and doing everything and just recreating the whole wrestling tapestry. Like he was phenomenal.
He was reinventing the wheel, but unfortunately,
Yes.
The consequences for him were catastrophic, weren't they? I mean, he was still in his 20s. It was a mess. It was 86 when he had suffered the back injury. 86 in.
It was 86 in that match, when he went against the ring rope. Yeah. And then I think he still went on till 93. But the thing about it is, with Dynamite Kid, as we said, Jay, you gave me a great line the other night, and I can't remember for the life of me.
Which one?
We had a few beers, but it was phenomenal. I had said the best bell-to-bell wrestler of all time, but you had given me.
Yeah,
it was beautiful. Because I don't believe, and that's a tribute to British wrestling also, Findlay, like that. He is the greatest, bell-to-bell wrestler of all time, because he took what. I don't know when we're going to talk about Dynamite Kid until it's its own show, but maybe it's nice to kind of use that, to the current product, I suppose.
Write that one down.
Yeah, because
I don't know whether he was the greatest ever, but he was definitely really good. And
I do believe pound for pound, bell to bell, I can't see anybody that's better. I mean, if you put him in prime in with Kenny Omega, well, Kenny Omega's probably going to get broken up if he doesn't slow down.
He was physically the most progressive in the sense that he had the ability, first above all else, to travel the world, pick up the best aspects of each style, and then put them all in the same place at the same time. He could just flip. He was, again, I liken great wrestlers like that to race cars. You can take a normal car, you can drive a Nissan Sunny for 48 years and never have a problem with it. But if you take that same car and put in a supercharged engine, a supercharged exhaust, just build that thing out to race, you'll probably get 3 or 4 races out of it before you burn it out. What level you run at dictates what your frame can take. And those high-octane boys who were so far ahead of the game in the 80s, unfortunately, more often than not, they're tragic. Whereas if you talk to some of the old timers right now, Christ, you could probably get Honky Tonk Man into a match and he could still sell what he did in 1986. There's race cars and then there's street cars, and
I'd say, if Dynamite was that good, would he have completely wrecked himself when he was still in his 20s in order to have the matches that he did?
I'd agree with you. And in fairness, that's a good point. That's why you can probably look at, that's probably why the Seans and the Bretts are still considered that, you know what I mean? And that's true. But staying on topic, let's do some of our favorite gimmick matches. Which I think is a really interesting one because, when we talk about gimmick matches, some people just think, oh, a sledgehammer is coming out, or, oh, it's a street fight, or, oh, it's this. No, gimmick matches can be, the Royal Rumble is a gimmick match. Why don't we just start there?
Yeah.
Because it is a battle royal. It is a gimmick match. So why don't, Finn, what about you? You brought this topic up when you were thinking of gimmick matches. What do you think of when you think of your favorite gimmick matches?
Well, in some ways, the Royal Rumble is the greatest gimmick match because it's it's the number 2 show for that pay-per-view each year. There's no doubt about it. It never slows down. There were some. I remember it kind of bottomed out in about 95. I think it was, and there was one. I think it was 95 and 96.
It was the one with Bulldog and Michaels, wasn't it?
I think it was, and there was
Michaels,
one around.
Super kick Bulldog over the rope, yeah.
And it was pretty flat. It was like a muted response to a lot of it, and the problem, and it really illustrated WWF's talent crisis at the time. It had so few people who were over, and it was so obvious when they wheeled out like 30 people that they expected people to cheer for or boo for. A lot of fans just weren't that interested in most of the participants. So, there was times when I think it has struggled. But, now, because they've changed the format with short periods between entrances, they've got far more talent to choose from, including developmental talent as well. And in when and also, I mean, it's a homage. It's us acknowledging the brilliance of Pat Patterson, who sadly died last week. I mean, it was his brainchild. He came up with it in 1988 as a TV special on the USA Network. It was very successful. Of course, to oppose Jim Crockett Promotions' Bunkhouse Stampede on pay-per-view that night at the time of the wrestling war between Crockett and WWF. So, but I mean, it was a huge hit from the start, and you look at it now, and it really is, I think, WWE's number 2 show of the year, and I mean, possibly New Japan's Tokyo Dome show in the overall scheme of things is a bigger event than that. But I mean, yeah, you probably got to say Royal Rumble is up there. I mean, I've always been a big fan of the ladder match, because I think they can do so much with it. It's been around, I think, since '79. I think Stampede was the first promotion to do
I think Brett brought it to Vince for WWF anyway, and then it
was the famous. Did you any of you see the Smack 'em Whack 'em VHS?
I've seen highlights of that. Unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to own it. But Niall, have you seen it? No,
I haven't seen that one. No.
Yeah, that was the famous Brett Shawn ladder match, which he did, I believe, in July of '92.
My apologies. It was actually on Silvervision's Bret Hart's Greatest Hits. Yes, I did see the full match. I did. My apologies. It was, I believe it was in the Royal Albert Hall or something like that. Was it somewhere?
No. It was recorded in the States. I can't remember exactly where.
But I did see the match, though. Yeah. I did.
Yeah, and Brett brought the ladder match to Vince. Vince had never run it prior to that. And they had an amazing match. And there was a VHS that was released in the UK by Silvervision called Smack 'em Whack 'em. And it had photos from that match on the cover. And we were like, what's this? This is the most amazing thing ever. They're having a ladder match. And Brett would have still been Intercontinental Champion at the time. That would have been his second reign.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that, and we were just like astounded by how exciting the match was. So that was, and then of course, that was not televised at the time. It was released on the VHS. So to most WWF fans, it was Shawn and Razor who had the first ladder match at WrestleMania 10. They'd actually had a series of ladder matches on house shows prior to that as like a warm-up to get themselves ready for the WrestleMania 10 bout from MSG. But I mean, I think the ladder match, when you think, it's still very popular to this day. And I think amazingly, even in 2020, they're still finding new ideas. They're still coming up with new things to do in that match that we've never seen before. Like the match between Jeff Hardy and Sami Zayn and AJ at Clash of Champions, I think it was. Remember when they put the handcuffs, didn't they, through Hardy's ear?
Yeah.
And handcuffed a ladder to his ear.
Yeah.
And that was just like such an inventive match, so thrilling and just so creative on so many levels. And you just think, wow, after all these years, they're still coming up with new things to do in this match. So I'm going with a ladder match. Well, I guess Royal Rumble ladder match is a tie.
Yeah, I like that actually. That's a good point. Yeah, no, I did see. I never saw the original format, but I did see the match itself on one of the. It was actually on Sean and Brett's VHS Silvervisions. So
okay.
I suppose I'll jump in. My favorite, I suppose, gimmick match would be. I suppose I did have Royal Rumble down. The ladder match, that was actually you kind of cheap shotted me there. To be fair, Findlay, you kind of got me on that one. It's like, to be honest with you, if we're going old school, I do like the old blue steel cage match. I really do. When it was done correctly. And I think of SummerSlam 94. I think that's probably the only time it's been done correctly. But I do like the format of just the steel cage, whether it be chain link, whether it be, blue steel. Warrior and Warrior and Rick Rude, they had a hell of a steel cage match as well. It was, what it was, when you're looking at it as a youngster and you see, it's the fear of your guy going into that cage because you think, oh, that's it. It's going to be over. They're going to be bleeding. They're going to be bloody, and that's it, You know, it's like we go back to Wrestle Wars '92. Every single man was bleeding. It was like, but it made sense in Wrestle War because, you know, that wasn't a PG company. It's like, no, this is what would actually, you know, this is what actually would happen if somebody's rubbing your, you know, your skin against chain link. But I think I would go with the cage match. I think the cage match can be done correctly, and I think when it is done correctly, it is still one of the most riveting matches, especially the suspense that can be built when one of the guys is trying to get out of the cage. Remember, they used to go out and they'd have a hand on the floor, and you were like, "Come on, come on!" And you know, you'd see a big space between your guy and the other guy, and the other guy would just take a big jump and just grab an ankle.
Yeah.
I think you can create great suspense with cage matches. So
I always remember when they did the NWA ones and Flair would be trying to escape being all slithery, and that guy showed his backside so many times that they grab him by the trunks to pull him back in. And like, he was always so tanned and bronze, but the butt was always a different kind of color.
that's like Sean in that's like Sean in 90. That's like Sean in 94
always get
WrestleMania 10,
they'd
right?
always get Flair. They'd have him by the trunks, or they'd have him by a boot or a lace or something, like dangling down off the steps and all.
Do you remember Sean went one further? Do you remember Sean went one further in that ladder match, and he decided not to pull up his trunks. He kept doing kicks, and he kept his ass out. It was like, you know,
that should be a gimmick in itself. The Raw arse match.
Yeah.
I think that was more of a rip on the cameramen and stuff like that. I think that was brilliant. Like.
Edit this, bitches.
Yeah, you can blur my ass out, but you can't blur lust out, ladies.
What about you, Jay?
It's you know what, I've been thinking about this again with these subjects. I love them. They get me thinking about things I haven't thought about in an awful long time. And for me, anything that gets away from the way we've gone with story-driven wrestling, any blow-off night, any night, like a perfect example is the Royal Rumble. It's like, we'll get these 3 belt matches out of the way. You know, you're supposed to care about the most important part of the night. And then we'll put 30 men into the ring and we'll just have fucking fun with pro wrestling again for the evening. It's like, again, if it was to be 2, it would be the Rumble or the classic Survivor Series. When, for one night only, all bets are off. When you get to see your favorite guys on the rope, hot tagging each other and getting the business done, and just the spots were so narrow and kind of piecemeal in long matches back in the 80s and the 90s that you could actually put 5 guys either side of each other on an apron and have a great match for 15 minutes because they just cut out all the wear down moves, all the holes, all of the manager interference, all of the storyline BS, all of just. And get on with giving us what we want, the crux of the situation, skip into the last half hour of the action movie and give us all we want for one night only a year. It was a payoff for being a fan and watching shitty script writing. It was like, just give us our favorite guys beside each other. You know, show me the Legion of Doom beside the Ultimate Warrior. Show me Tito Santana beside anybody. Show me Rick Rude beside Harley Race. Just give me all I want. Allow one night of pure, unadulterated, this is why I love wrestling. And I'd have to say, for me, like I said, the blow-off nights, the Rumble or the Survivor Series Classic. I mean, TLC, Money in the Bank, all that shit's fun. It brought us into the new generation again. It allowed the birth of the Spot Monkeys and the big climactic scenes and stuff like that. But throw on SummerSlam 88 or 89 and I am fucking in, balls deep for 2 hours. Show me it all, you know?
Finlay likes that analogy, all right?
Yeah. Yeah, and also with Royal Rumble, I mean, you know, the winner then gets the title match at WrestleMania. You know, I mean, there's this, you know, huge, like Survivor Series that just took place last month. There was no consequences, there was no rewards, there was nothing at stake in any of the matches, really. No titles were on the line, so what was the point of it all?
They have let that night of wrestling down something fierce by manipulating it into something the company wants to brand and sell as opposed to something the fans want to buy. The old, like I said, blow off night of wrestling. Let's let bygones be bygones. You've got people who used to feud beside each other. The hot dog means so much more that night than it did 2 weeks ago or a month or a year ago. They've let Survivor Series down dramatically.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there
I
needs
would
to be
agree
some
with
at stake. There needs to be a forfeit. You know, there needs to be consequences and rewards. And without that, why are we watching this thing?
There needs to be a reason as well. And holding it a month after the brand selection, you know, the whole BS they do, it makes no sense. Those guys were wearing red last week. Now they're wearing blue and they're supposed to care about it. Make me care about it, not their bloody wages. I mean, we all know 20 of them are getting fired in April. Who gives a fuck? Just show me some wrestling. Make me care. I don't give a damn. You know, but again, look, first world problems.
Yeah, no, I dig it. I hear that, and I think it's actually very, very true and very, very relevant. All those points. I suppose what we should do, we'll take a little quick 2-minute break before we get into the final discussion, which is, of course, Roman Reigns and the fact that Roman Reigns now, as you know, he's gone from that turn him heel, Vince, turn him heel, to finally he is now heel, and he is full blown heel. So when we come back, we will discuss the High Chief himself, Mr. Roman Reigns. Welcome back to the Four Podmen. And during the break, we did make one very, very fatal error. And this is my problem. As a host, sometimes we get excited. We try to move on with the show. But we did fail to mention that Niall did not get to choose his favorite gimmick match, which is, of course, guys and girls, the Judy Bagwell on a pole match. So, Niall, why don't you lead us in and tell us why that is your favorite match?
You cornered me now on flag matches, have you? Like flag matches would be my favorite match.
No. Judy Bagwell on a pole match. This is different. Or on a forklift, if you wish.
No, I ain't getting any. I ain't going down that road. No, I just no. I'm a Royal Rumble and Classic Survivor Series and those type of matches and stuff like that. And I also have an appreciation for the newer ones, like the newer versions of the ladder matches, like the Money in the Bank matches and stuff like that. Although I did prefer them prior to becoming their own pay-per-view. I thought some of those original Money in the Bank matches were really good, like the one at 22 where Flair feigning the injury and stuff like that. I thought was good fun and stuff like that.
And looking forward to Kofi and seeing what he was going to do, stuff like that.
Yeah, and Shelton Benjamin and
yes,
all
Shelton.
those guys, you know, just Shelton was the hero of it, really, wasn't he? So,
yeah.
And John Morrison.
Yeah.
John Morrison at 24 doing that flip to the outside with the ladder and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, no, they were
even the prize.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, to be fair, I do think that the Elimination Chamber was actually a decent concept when it started, especially when Michaels came back and finally won the world title once again, albeit with a ridiculous hairdo and not having his full gear, looking like a Dutch boy, as he called himself. That's his words, not mine. I think, I do believe that the Elimination Chamber has a little bit of an element of the War Games thing, with the cells opening up. And, if done correctly, I think it can be a pretty decent gimmick match as well. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I definitely do think it had its merit when it was done correctly.
I personally, I'm shocked I forgot about Money in the Bank. Hot Tag is right. The ability in a program of such scripted pro wrestling for somebody outside of the Golden Circle to have a wild card over the course of the year that he can drop whenever he wants. That's a lovely idea. It's a hark back to any man can be president. You know what I mean? It's any man can be champ.
Yeah,
if he does his business.
Very true. Very true.
I love that. I'm shocked I forgot about that. Thank you, Hot Tag.
Problem at all. You're welcome.
But we do move on now to Roman Reigns now and his new character and his new attitude. Obviously, he's now a heel. He wants to be the head of the table in the Anoa'i and the Samoan dynasty family, and he has, of course, Paul Heyman, his guy, his right hand man. We'll throw this one to you, Findlay, because obviously this was something that you wanted to bring. So go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it, you just said before that for years, we're like, when's Roman Reigns going to turn heel? And then it kind of became this thing that you sort of forbid yourself from talking about because, no, it's never going to happen. You know, you're just punishing yourself.
John Cena 2.0, right? You're
exactly.
Thinking...
It's like this fantasy of this guy who needs to turn heel. But Vince isn't going to turn him heel because he's Vince's guy and Vince needs him front and center and his baby face. And, you know, we cannot have Roman Reigns turning heel because Vince will not allow it. And then finally it happened. And when it did happen, I was thinking, is this for real? Is it a tweener? You know, is this just a tease? You know, it's like, stop it, Vince, stop it. You know, it's just like, is he going to go the whole hog with this? And he absolutely has. And so has Reigns. And you look at it and you think, well, why the hell did this not happen sooner? But at the same time, it's like, if it had, would it have been as good? Would it have been as good if it had happened 2 or 3 years ago?
There you go.
And the chances are it wouldn't have been, because Reigns is a guy that's got all this sort of experience now. He knows what to do. You can see that he's got tremendous self-control as a character and also as a performer. And he knows what he should do and he knows what he shouldn't do. He doesn't do too much. He understands who he is. He's absolutely ultra self-confident. He believes he's the biggest star in the business.
Well, when you look like that guy looks, I mean, I'd be super self-confident.
Well, I mean, this is a guy who came back with those veneers, those teeth. I mean, you've got to be, you've got to be pretty self-confident to have.
My missus watched the Survivor Series with me, and she turned around, and I swear to God, I mean, you want to feel less than a man. She goes, wow, that lad is just so good looking, isn't he?
Well, it's like...
And I'm like, is that a question to me?
Yeah, but it's like what we spoke about earlier.
Yes, is the answer.
If there was ever a guy who has learned how to slow things down, like we spoke about earlier, he's that guy. He has slowed things right down.
There you go. There you go, Noel. Now, that's a great point.
Everything he does now, he does with meaning. And you know, he's getting that. Part of that is from Paul Heyman as well, because Paul Heyman does everything slow. Everything is slow.
Yeah. And Heyman's had
much more meaning.
And Heyman's had an amazing comeback as well. You know, Lesnar leaving, and then it's not certain when he's going to return, presumably when crowds are allowed to attend again. But Heyman, of course, was head booker of the Raw brand, but then he was asked to step down, and he was a man without a purpose. So him coming back as Roman Reigns' chief counsel or lead counsel has been a revelation for him, because he's playing a very different character to the character he played with Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
And
he's subservient, yeah.
Absolutely. And Reigns just has so much menace, but doesn't raise his voice. It's just like, he's almost like the classic Bond villain, isn't he, from the 60s? He's just there and he's so menacing, but knows he is, so he doesn't have to yell or shout or rage. He's just aware of who he is and the role he plays and what he means to this company, and that everyone out there is beneath him. He's above them all, and he doesn't feel like he needs to shout about it. He just knows.
He's exactly like, he reminds me of I don't know whether he's been watching this either, but he should. It's like that character Kingpin in Daredevil, you know? Like,
all right, yeah. You
remember, like, and they done it in show, like the guy portraying it is just so calmly spoken, and it's like, I know what I can do. I can break this guy any moment, you know, that I choose to. And it's like, it's really, I'd agree with you, Findlay. That's a really good point.
I've always thought of the MF as almost pro wrestling's Khal Drogo. He does more with a look than most people can do with a script, and that's perfect wrestling. And also, of all of the pretty boys the history of the business has had to pin up on walls, he is the ship that launched 1,000 schoolgirl posters. He's this big, intelligent, articulate man who can go hard and heavy, but he can also sell correctly. It's a Goldilocks situation, you know, too big, too small, just right there. Even the fact that they made a big deal of, oh, he's not wearing his stupid SWAT team T-shirt. Now he's coming down naked to the waist. It's all so perfectly cooked.
It's perfect.
Again, if they'd revealed him as a heel too early, he would have just had to flip between heel babyface for the next 10 years. But the fact that he was rammed down our throat and people only gave the guy a break as a serious, credible athlete and on-screen performer, bless him, I hope it never happens again. The man got ill, and we all put kayfabe away and said, you know what, whatever, business is here, reality is here. Hope you get better. Please come back. Even though we enjoy booing you. And when he did come back, he came back, did a little bit more run as a babyface style, but not so much, and then slipped straight into this, like you said, this cerebral Bond villain Khal Drogo style heel who's beating the living shit out of his own family. it's woo.
Well,
it's the way we watch.
And it is perfect. And it's like I said, Niall, like I was saying to you, it's like, when I'm sitting there watching Survivor Series with my missus, who doesn't watch wrestling a lot, but when he comes out of the locker room when Paul Heyman's waiting for him, and she just goes, "Wow, that man is perfect, isn't he?" He's actually just
uncomfortable viewing as a male.
She's asking me the question as if, like, am I meant to agree with this to you? Yeah. And she was like, look at him and tell me you don't. And I was like, well, listen, just because my hairline isn't as good as his, and just because I don't have, zip codes on my trapezius muscles doesn't mean that I'm less of a man than him. The answer was yes.
You need to get one of those Polynesian chest tattoos, and then you'll look real cool.
Oh yeah, and a wig.
Yeah, but baby, does he get your hot chicken rolls?
And a loan of Jay's hair there going on by the looks of it. That's the thing about it, and that's. But it is the point that that Findlay made. I've said this. I think Finn, we may have talked about this off air, last week. He is the consummate comic book character. I mean, if you wanted to design a comic book character now in 2020. You would design him. I mean, everybody's gone on about sexy Momoa, as they call him, Jason Momoa. And they're very similar. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I mean, if you put Jason Momoa and Roman Reigns beside each other, Jason Momoa is even smaller than Roman Reigns. He's just, Roman Reigns is an absolute monster of a man, and yeah, he's just he's the perfect comic book character. And star, and yeah, I mean, those Samoan guys just know how to make them. He's he can work in the ring. Yeah. He can sell. As Jay said, he can. Just a look is all he needs to do. I love that. I love how during his matches he's able to talk to himself. When he's getting frustrated, when things aren't going right for him, and he kind of channels that inner anger. I love how it builds. I can see that build in him. It's like reversed Hulkamania, It's not just like, oh, all of a sudden your punches don't do that on me. No, it's like, oh, I'm getting angry. What am I doing?
I'd like to interject there as well. And the fact that the crowd isn't there is allowing him to be who he knows he can be. Yes. If the world was booing every act and action, I mean, wrestling is going to be better for the fact that they weren't allowed to have crowds. There's men who are going to steal up, but he is the perfect example. Forgive me, I just wanted to interject there.
No, it's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, somebody earlier this year made the point that would Bayley have been the success that she has been this year had the crowds been there? Because she was somebody who allowed herself to be rattled by audiences when they were booing her, when they should have been cheering her. So I think it's safe to say that she has made so much progress this year as an all-round character because the audiences haven't been there. And now, of course, you've got the LED, the Thunderdome audience. I mean, I don't know how much sound sweetening is going on there. I mean, I think most of it is genuine, but I could be wrong about that. I'm
zero, sure. I would say zero.
Yeah, I mean, and Roman Reigns is provoking the reaction that they're desirous of now, i.e. boos. And as is Bayley. So, but I mean, yeah, just to go back to Roman Reigns, it should be illegal to be that good looking, shouldn't it? And, but he's
you're
just
right.
like, he's so assured. That's what it is. It's just so assured. And 3 years ago, would he have had that level of confidence in himself? Probably not. And I think he knows that it's, the right time to play this character in the right circumstances, and that he really doesn't have any competition. Cena's gone. Undertaker's retired. I mean, Triple H doesn't appear to be wrestling anymore. I'm not saying he's never going to wrestle again, but he didn't perform at this year's WrestleMania.
Hopefully he doesn't. Yeah.
So, with a
Whoa.
If we have to see Batista, if we have to see the last match that we did with Batista and H, to be fair, I don't think anyone wants to see that, including you, Finn, right? 25 minutes of yeah.
And the win over Drew McIntyre at Survivor Series, in one of the best matches WWE has produced this year, was like a ringing endorsement from Vince McMahon to Roman Reigns. You are my guy, So he knows. So. He knows, and what it's all about in pro wrestling, because it's all coming from within. It's you've got to believe in yourself, and if you don't believe in yourself, then people can sense that. They can sense the weakness.
Very much so. I'd agree with that. Like, I mean,
I think,
there's times where you can kind of feel, shit, I need like a little bit of a prep talk from somebody. Do you know what I mean? And I'm a little bit unsure about this angle because I'm not sure how I'm going to look at the end of it. Or what way should I do this? What way should I do that? But you're 100% correct. You're looking right now at a specimen, basically, who knows exactly what he needs to do at all times. You're basically looking at the modern day Rock and John Cena, and I would 100% agree with you there. I think, and I think if crowds come back either this year or next year, I think that's obviously where they want to go with the culmination of this storyline with him obviously facing the Rock. There's been rumors and leaks of that The Rock would like to have one more Mania match, and I mean, why wouldn't The Rock want to have one more Mania match with his with his family member, basically?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was in was it the Hobbs and Shaw movie? Didn't Roman Reigns have a small role in that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, Vince must be pretty worried, though, mustn't he? Because
he knows The Rock, that fucking Rock, that damn Rock.
Would he though? He is a pure crossover star and a man who was the first bloke in 15 years to get The Rock booze in a WrestleMania ring. He also has his cousin who bought his whole American football company out. Vince has that Anoia, whatever how you pronounce that name, family sewn up. And then Roman, he's got a bona fide star going into the future who is pure blood grapple. He's pure blood wrestler.
You know what's going to happen, don't you? Jason Momoa gets sacked from Aquaman. They reboot the whole thing. We have a new Aquaman.
Dennis Mimosa is going to quit as the action man.
I'm just hoping that when they do that 24/7 365 on him, that they show that footage of him walking into the office and going, right, we're going to turn you heel and put you with Paul Heyman. And Heyman's there going, strap yourself in, boy. It's going to be one hell of a ride because this is unbelievable. He says, we are going to push this to the moon. Brock is now gone and you're my new boy.
That's a good point, Noel. Noel, actually,
but
go a bit further into that, Noel. That's a really good point because I think
go deep.
I could just imagine like you got Roman there, who's sort of like he's kind of as a babyface, he's kind of running out of dance partners. He's probably wrestled everyone already around the circuit, countless amount of times. And then he's thinking, right, well, what am I going to do now? And like, am I going to go into this John Cena foul type of thing and just continue on and on and on? And it was like, I can imagine him going in and he's hearing this and he's going, I cannot wait for this. This is what I've been crying out for. And like when you're put with Paul Heyman, you're unlikely to fail, are you? Now, you're not really going to fail, especially if you're trying to get over as a heel. But the other thing that I think has dropped with him in terms of his confidence and stuff like that, I think he's finally realised what he represents there in terms of the family and the history and the legacy. And I think he carries the burden of that. And he knows that he has to perform at a certain level. And you can see, like, even in these little slogans and things that he's coming out to wreck everyone and, the head of the table, he's really turning around and saying, I'm about to continue this legacy on, but it's going to be done a certain way and not in a passion. Yeah, absolutely. And he's loving it because he's under more pressure now, I'd imagine, than he's ever been under in terms of, because I'm sure he's representing the family and that tradition, you know, but on the other side as well, he's now the kind of heel of the company, and he's trying to make sure that Jey Uso, was it Jey Uso's the guy who's doing the storyline with him, that he's still relevant, and he's bringing him along with him and stuff like that. And it's just like, you know, it's working great, you know. And the good thing about it as well is the crowd have reacted to it properly as well, you know what I mean? Because, you know, they could turn around, like, you know, if you turn John Cena heel, the crowd are still going to, they'll probably start cheering him instead of booing him, you know.
Yeah, it's irony at this stage, yeah.
But I think with Roman, yeah, but you look at Roman, and Roman looks like he's a good-looking guy, but you know he's a badass and he cave your head in, you know, that kind of way. Yeah. And like with Heyman there as well, and I just think the way he slowed up his work, his facials, the way he delivers his lines, his whole persona has really changed. And having Heyman there on the side just glorifies it. And then just the whole idea of carrying the weight of the family tradition, that this has to work no matter what, and putting everything into it. I'd say he's putting himself under serious pressure, and he's eating it up and loving it.
Yeah. There's almost an element of General Zod about him as well.
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of those things, I suppose, in closing. Like, we look at Randy Orton, he's reinvented himself this year as well. I mean, he's just decided to get interested again. And you know, just as he gets interested, they take the belt off him again. But I think there's a reason for that. There's a method to that madness. They want him to get that record as close to, if not equal, the Flair one as well, to be fair, because he's always been the golden boy, you know.
Well, that's happening.
And that's what's happening, exactly. He's going to get that belt just in intermittent belts, and then obviously Finn, you might agree. Oh, sorry, Jay. Yeah, you wanted to point in there.
Give me 1 second. It's just Niall just raised a very clear point to me that I hadn't seen before. I love these fucking chats. When somebody says something shit, something becomes so clear. What we're seeing in General Zod meets fucking Khal Drogo is he's currently grooming the next John Cena. Jay is the young, upstart, handsome Samoan, and when he breaks away from this peer pressure, family, high-end, I'll never be in a match with The Rock at WrestleMania, not yet, but in 5 years' time, when the company needs the guy to ram down your throat as the super baby face, you could be hard-pressed to find a harder soul character than Jey Uso. Like, he's got all the makings of the future John Cena, and we won't turn on him the way we turned on John, simply because we watched him take a beating with a chair for 4 years off the head of the table, who's now the professional heel of the Samoan. Forgive me, I was...
No, Jay, I think what you're saying there, like, in fairness, and you know, I don't have to put words in your mouth, but I understand exactly what you're saying. I understand exactly what you're saying. What you're basically saying is he's leaving the company in a better position when it is time for him to
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
No, we're not going to reject the next super baby face, because when it's young Uso, who can argue with him? He has the look, he works, he's from the pedigree. If he gives us 10 years, if we don't have to put up with this shit, because I did for 4 years under, the head of the table, all day long, like, it's I love this business. I love the sport.
What do you think of that, Finn?
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when Jimmy returns, because he's going to be part of this story as well, isn't he? I mean, he already has been, the Hell in a Cell and Clash of Champions matches. I think was it Clash of Champions? Yeah, it was Clash of Champions, wasn't it? Yeah. So he's already been involved there. He's recovering from torn ACL. So I imagine he'll be cleared probably around Royal Rumble time. So he's going to turn up, and then Jay's going to be even more conflicted. Jimmy's going to be like, well, what are you doing? Roman's treating you like garbage. Spicy. He's treating you like garbage. I mean, did you see last week's SmackDown when Roman ended up absolutely clobbering Jay with a chair at the end of it? I mean, what?
He beat the shit out of him.
Yeah. Absolutely battered him. Yeah. So, I mean, Jimmy's there. He's going to be involved in this somehow. And obviously, Reigns choked him out in the I Quit match. And so Jay then ended up having to quit to save his brother. So I don't know what role he's going to play in it, but that's going to be really interesting to see what goes on there, because it seems like
Wars.
Jay's exactly. He's kind of beholden to this. He's signed this he entered into the I Quit match, signed the agreement. You've got to do this, otherwise you'll be excommunicated from the family. So get in line, which he did. Obviously, it's reluctant. Reigns is continuing to punish him verbally and physically every week on SmackDown. So I think at some point, I do agree that Jay there's going to be a moment when Jay is like, I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take this anymore. The famous line from the Network movie from '76. I'm not going to take this anymore. So he's going to turn on Reigns. He's going to. I mean, this is the rise.
He's going to turn on Reigns when Reigns beats the living shit out of his younger brother who's already been injured. And that's snapping point for him. He's like, you did it to me and I took it, but I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yeah,
wrestling.
At some point, he's just going to say, I'm not putting up with this anymore. I've gone along with this and enough. I'm not going to stand it anymore. I can't stand it anymore. So there's going to be, a boiling point there. He's pretty close to it now. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they're going to milk this all the way to WrestleMania.
Isn't it amazing?
I think it could go further. I think he'll take it until it's put on his younger brother the way it was on him.
Yeah, quite possibly. So
Noel, you wanna chime in there, Noel, don't you?
I'd sort of love if they sort of like they hung around with Reigns until that Rock match at Mania, and then they screwed Reigns out of the match and went with the Rock. I'd be all over that. Like that would be classic. But the other thing I was thinking as well is, you finally have a crowd that are booing a heel because they need someone to boo, and that he's a full-time heel. He's there every week. Whereas with Lesnar, they were booing the heel because they actually him there. That kind of way. So his timing has been really good as well, insofar as he's a heel and they're all booing him, but they need him there. The crowd want him there, So they've bought into him as a heel. So they're sort of bringing him along on the journey as well, even though they're pulling against him. They're not pulling against him as in, we want you back as a babyface. They still want that. They're still, they still have an appetite for that heel side of him and stuff like that. And
he also stepped in with
Lesnar,
new teeth.
Because he was part-time. Yeah.
He stepped in with new teeth.
What's really important with Roman is that he wants to be booed. He's not like you watch Chris Jericho on AEW, right? He comes out and you're like, what sort of heel are you? I mean, he's pissed off if they're not singing his theme tune over and over. And it's like this kind of comedy. But Reigns is the antithesis of that. He is he's a 100% old school villain who wants people to detest him. And
where is your hate?
Yeah, people loathe him because he's a bad person. And what's worse is he claims that he's a good person and he's doing all this for Jay's benefit while beating the shit out of him. So, I mean, that's what makes him doubly outstanding as a heel. But yeah, I mean, so many heels in wrestling, and this is not a new thing. This has been going on for decades, hasn't it? I mean, look at the NWO. I mean, they were cool heels, weren't they?
Yeah.
It was edgy.
Yeah.
This is Shakespeare.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is not a new development, but Reigns is, he's refreshingly old school in so far that he's a guy that wants to be booed. He does not want a single person to cheer him. He doesn't want anyone to think, oh, that was funny. He don't want he's not making jokes. He's not trying to get over as like this sort of tweener type or this anti-hero. He is like an absolute 100% to the core villain.
Well, he has that. I suppose in closing, what I would say is that he has that Roddy Piper heat, in the sense that, fair enough, he's not got the Roddy Piper character, but he's got that Roddy Piper walk to the ring. That, okay, I'm Roddy Piper. If you want to fight me, I will punch you in the face, no problem. If you want to strike me, but you shouldn't, because you should fear me. You know what I mean? So essentially what I'm saying is, you've got finally in 2020, other than someone like a Chris Jericho or MJF on the big leagues, by the way, you've finally got somebody that's not afraid of the heat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's essentially it in a nutshell. Somebody who's not afraid of real heat. And
embrace the dark side.
Yeah. It's crazy. I'm like, I have been in remission, and you guys are still gonna boo me. Really?
Samoan said, "Fuck yeah!"
And I guarantee you, he will use that at one point. I was in remission. I came back for you people, and yet you still boo me. Really? that's something he can always use. Like, and it's because obviously he said it live on Raw. You know what I mean? So he's got so much in his locker, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say, is that he can use that and flip it back on the fans.
Yeah.
And
I mean, for me, in conclusion, I think he's on course to be remembered and to genuinely become a bona fide all-time great. I think he's on the road to achieving that, based on merit, not based on hype.
And work rate too. His matches are flawless anyway. He
should
doesn't
look at his medicine bag. He can talk, he can go, he can brawl, he can wrestle, he can act. I mean, when was the last time? Also, he knows exactly how. When have we ever seen a heel manager treated like a subservient fucking footstool? He's got new aspects to an old game that we haven't seen in a long time, and he's got Vince McMahon sitting at the desk saying, "That's good shit. Why didn't we do this 3 years before?"
Jay, I can answer that question for you. We haven't seen that in a manager managing people since we saw Bobby the Brain Heenan with Mr. Perfect and Rick Rude.
We haven't, full stop. I mean, everybody remembers
we saw guys like that able to talk for sure. But you know what I mean? They didn't need Bobby Heenan, is what I'm saying. I think you're right.
No, absolutely. Look, we use this phrase often in pro wrestling, and when we do, nothing but good comes from it. The motherfucker's a perfect storm.
Yep.
Yeah. I think from my point of view, when we talk about that sort of legendary status and stuff like that, the only thing I fear for him is he may not have the right catalogue of dance partners.
Yeah.
To really create that sort of, that legendary hype and legacy. I would fear is that he doesn't have that, the volume of dance partners. When you go back and you look at Ric Flair and you look at Hulk Hogan and you look at all these greats in the business and stuff like that, and all the dance partners that they had, I'm not too sure whether the roster that's there will. I think the roster that's there may let him down in terms of on that journey to being the greatest. Like you go back and you look at John Cena's career, even some of the brilliant dance partners he had down through the years and stuff like that, and all to create that kind of legacy. And of course, there was a lot of fob in between and stuff like that. But if you look at the people he worked against, it's a who's within the business. But now, if you look at the roster that's there now, and you look at the who's who within the business,
where are the super baby faces?
Up to,
yeah.
It's going to be difficult for that to stack up to an Undertaker and a CM Punk and these guys that John Cena worked, Eddie Guerrero, those type of guys, Well, I don't know whether those guys are in the roster there to make you. Do you know the way, like when you come a legendary, like you want to create these moments that when you go back and you look and go, remember that, and remember this, and remember that, and remember that. When we fondly talk about these legends.
Yeah, it's just those moments when
I don't know whether you create enough of those. Yeah,
I guess it's just those moments. When it's a huge match when the two just square off and they haven't done anything.
Rock and Hogan.
You're witnessing a moment in wrestling history when you just square off. And you're right, there isn't that many candidates who could do that with Roman Reigns.
Yeah, no, it's like Rock and Hogan. It's like Rock and Hogan, like you said. It's like, it's that kind of thing where you just look at the crowd. Just all it takes is a couple of turns each, and that the older man is saying to him, "Milk this shit. Look around. This is mental," And I think Niall's 100% correct. The only thing I will say,
when you go back and look at Austin and Rock.
Yeah, well, that's the same thing. But the only thing I would say, I suppose, just so we do have an end to the show and we can allow Findlay to go and do what he needs to do. What I would say is I do believe that the dance partners are there in this current roster. There's definitely talent there that can be harnessed. It's just a matter of whether they're going to be allowed to be harnessed or not. We're in a different era now where talent is so it's micromanaged. You know what I mean? And it's not the same. I mean, you could throw an AJ Styles in there. You could throw a Randy Orton in there and have a program with someone like Roman Reigns, and it's going to be absolutely flawless. But it's a case of whether the next level of talent that comes up from NXT, the now feeder club, I suppose, to be allowed to flourish. And again, you know, Reigns came from that same feeder club, the same way Seth Rollins did. You know, Seth Rollins was a golden boy for a while. It's just a matter of what they do on the main show and what the guys in the back allow them to do. And I think, you know, until Vince is kind of, I suppose, you know, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I think until Vince is kind of, you know, not in control of everything anymore, I think you will see like the likes of Triple H bring that sort of old school kind of thing back, you know, because he was part of it. You know, he was part of it. And I think Triple H for sure loves the business the way it's meant to be loved. And he is, you know, he's quite clearly shown down in NXT that that's how well to an extent. Well,
yeah, we've just seen a 45-minute War Games match after.
Yeah, I know. He kind of lost me on that match too. I was like, shit, you had me, Hunter. What did you do to me?
You know, ultimately it doesn't matter. It's been so long we've had a dominant heel that we deserve a dominant reign, and we have one. And if it takes them
pun intended.
3, 4, no, every pun intended. And if it takes them 5 years to build up a catalog of baby faces, well, this is what the build and rebuild process is about. We spoke earlier on, when you raise the bar higher, you raise it to a point where you can't jump over it anymore. Sometimes you got to just drop it down the bottom. I mean, we've already got 2 or 3 men who can do it, but we don't want them to do it too soon. We need it to be the anti-Hulkamania. We need it to be the antithesis of everything that we've been groomed to believe is predictable. The reason we still watch and the reason we still love is because it's fucking unpredictable.
Yeah.
And I suppose in closing, Finn, I want to ask you a question actually based on what Jay said there, because that's a really, really great point. You know, when you look at someone like a Drew McIntyre, who is, you know, Chief of the Highlands, you know.
It's Drew.
And Drew is a good fella. I've had many great moments with you in my.
Hey, listen, Vince doesn't give swords to everybody.
Yeah. But, you know, is Drew going to be your babyface Hulkamania that's going to sell, you know, 1 million T-shirts? Not really, in my opinion. I don't think he's your next Stone Cold Steve Austin. I think he's a great-looking guy. He's a great look. He's got a huge build. I mean, listen, Drew is a heel in any man's book. If I'm writing a wrestling show, Drew is my heel, you know, because of the look.
I agree. I mean, Drew, to me, he's done well this year. I mean, a lot of people have said, well, you know, Raw's ratings have gone through the floor, which they have. I think it was in July they hit the lowest numbers ever. But I mean, the fact that Drew's champion again indicates to me that Vince isn't blaming Drew for that outcome. So he's doing well at the moment, I think. I like his storyline with Sheamus. And I think those two as heels could be almost like modern day Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen. You know, I think those two have got the potential to really do something special as a heel team, and maybe bringing someone else in, or maybe adding 2 more members and creating like a new super faction. I think they could do something pretty special. I think there's really good dialogue, really good banter between them. I think the interplay is top of the line. I think they're really good. So I think his future is as a heel, away from Roman Reigns, of course, because he doesn't want to try and compete with Roman. But I think those two are going to have a really good year, 2021. Just one thing I want to add actually to the Rock versus Roman Reigns thing that just occurred to me. I mean, we were just talking about those moments when you have like the 2 stars opposite each other and the crowd's going ballistic. And, wow, we never thought we'd see this. They can't really do Rock Roman next year because the crowds might not be back. So that would be totally wasted. Yeah. If they were to do that in front of the Thunderdome crowd.
That's why I said maybe the year after. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you did mention that. It's got to be 2022 because before a massive audience, that could be, you know, like a seminal, that could be like a milestone in Roman Reigns' career. What like a, you know, Hogan Andre or, you know, Rock Hogan or one of those huge.
For sure.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
You know, in front of the Thunderdome. You know, I'm not saying it's a damn squib, but it's not even 10% of what it could be. So, you know, but Drew Drew as a villain, as a heel next year. I mean, you've got to figure Sheamus is turning heel on him. I mean, they've set that one up pretty well. I thought they actually had a really good night, both of them on Raw this week. But I think if Sheamus turns on him, then Drew turns heel. I think those two can do something pretty special next year.
Yeah, I'm interested to see it. I think, 100%. I suppose in closing, guys, for the fifth time, which I like, I'm happy to keep this bar open all night. I have no problem with it. I'm not a last orders guy. Trust me.
I'm saying nothing more.
No, I'm happy. Like, I mean, Jesus H. Christ, I'm happy to keep going with this all night long, just like Ric Flair would ride Space Mountain. But,
you know what? We came in with a set fold of parameters for conversation, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm happy we deviated because it has been a joyous chat.
Absolutely. And for all our new YouTube viewers that are watching this now, this is what we do on the Four Podmen. We segue. This is what we do.
Fuck format.
It's all about segue. It's format. Format is
Tangent Seros.
Exactly. Format is for soberness. And we are not.
I'll try harder in the future to get the flag match over.
Listen, I could tell you how Judy Bagwell on a pole worked well, but I'd have to think about it.
I'm just surprised nobody brought up that hot sack of shit over the head match. Like, remember Jake the Snake and Rick the Model Martel? What would you call that? The fucking. Yeah, no, fuck the hot bag of shit over the head match. Yeah.
It's but I suppose does anyone want to add anything to I suppose the Roman Reigns kind of story and the narrative and the future of I suppose the future of the business, because like for once now in the last 5 years it does look like the company have a direction with one particular star that it's going somewhere finally. You know, it sounds like, and it seems like to me, that they're listening to these Stone Cold Steve Austin podcasts, and they're listening to people like Stone Cold talking about this is what you can do with a Roman Reigns if you take the leashes off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Finny Mac listens to nobody.
Well, Finn, I'm sure you'd agree with me there on that one. In that sense, that because Stone Cold has been talking about that for a long time and saying this is how you fix someone like him. And listen, Vince listens to everybody, Jay. That's the thing. It's just what actually gets in.
Stop?
It's what gets in there. That's the problem.
I listen, but does he act? That's the difference.
Yes.
Does he act?
He definitely. Oh well, Jason. My office is always open.
The queue goes down the street. It's a pandemic. You can't come into the office without a mask.
Don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way down. That's
Use
me.
the hand sanitizer as well.
2 squirts, kid.
How does Bruce Pritchard do it? I don't know. Bruce Pritchard produced
on his knees, more than likely.
Well, yes, I'd say so. So look, guys, it's been a phenomenal show. I really want to thank Finn for coming on. I really, really appreciate you taking your time out. It's been an absolute pleasure. Obviously, you've been on the dozen before. It's your debut on the Four Podmen. I would love you to come on again sometime.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's when I say tangents are us, it's really good when a conversation. You've got to just go with the flow, follow the conversation. I hope I haven't hogged the limelight here and hogged all the airtime. One person in particular, I don't think had as much airtime as the rest of us. So I think he should say something now.
He's talking to you, Noel, not me or Jay.
Hot tag.
I really enjoyed it. A wise man once told me one time that I should be listening when I'm talking. So I normally go with that approach at times as well. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Great to meet you and stuff like that. And
likewise.
It was always a pleasure reading the publication. It was fantastic and a big part of my life,
Right. Yeah, well, thanks for buying it. That's all I can say. And Inside the Ropes magazine is continuing that tradition. I'll just say that now.
It's very true. It is very, very true. And I think, Jay, you want to say anything in closing?
I absolutely
make
do.
Make it 5 seconds.
Done. In this age of retro, can you please bring a magazine back? Because collecting internet pages isn't the fucking same. It's not the same. I can't pass internet pages to my son. Bring the damn thing back.
Well, let's not get into that here now.
Like everybody.
No, honestly, unsung hero. It's been an absolute pleasure. I couldn't have enjoyed it anymore. I really.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. Hopefully, I'll be invited back sometime next year.
Fucker, you're the fifth pod, man. JJ Dillon, you can come back when you want.
No, without a shadow, Finn, we always have that, thing going on. You will definitely be able to come back on, and I really do take, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you taking time out of your day. And if there's anything you want to plug, go ahead and plug it before we go.
Well, podcast, Powerslam podcast that I do, what's going down with Inside the Ropes, and obviously Inside the Ropes Wrestling Magazine. I hope everyone will check that out at Inside the Ropes website. That's the only plugs I have. But yeah, thanks very much for inviting me. I've had a really good time. It's been food for thought. Lots of, as we've been podcasting and been digesting the commentary, like never thought about that. And this is, in all seriousness, this is the fascinating thing about doing these podcasts with lots of different people, is that people say things that you never really thought about, and that sets off a light bulb in your head that you never even thought was there, and it's it's a fascinating process.
Absolutely,
that's the problem with wrestling: too many experts, not enough fans.
And before I go, I'm going to do this man a solid, because you know what, he's not even saying it yet. There is going to be an episode, a copy of the magazine coming out as well, of course, where there is an interview with the great Jim Cornette that Findlay Martin, of course, did just do. So
last month we spoke. Yeah, issue 4 of Inside the Ropes Wrestling Magazine, which is out later this month. That features part 1 of my interview with Jim Cornette, and issue 5 features part 2. And this was an epic interview with Jim, and we talked about, in part 1, we talked about AEW, of course. Not sure if AEW is going to enjoy this interview very much. We talked about...
On behalf of the 4 Podmen, we are nothing to do.
We talked about possibility of unionization, the independent contractor classification, which has been a big story lately, with Andrew Yang talking about it, saying that if the Democrats were elected, which they have been in the States, then they would challenge it. So, we talked about old territory days. We talked about all sorts of stuff. In part 2, in issue 5, which is out in January, we talk about a lot of historical stuff, Crockett Promotions, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, his return to WWE to induct the Rock and Roll Express into the Hall of Fame in 2017. He ran into Kevin Dunn, by the way. So we've got that story. So just all that stuff. He also, just talked about his interactions with Vince McMahon when he first went to WWF in 1993. When he was running Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and they needed him to manage Yokozuna because Mr. Fuji wasn't up to the job anymore. So he went up there, and it was a good payday for him, and good publicity for him, and just that whole process of going to work for the enemy. I said to him, well, you were a territory guy. You got entered the business in 82 and for Jerry Jarrett in Memphis, and worked for Bill Watts, and worked for Crockett, and worked for all these other territories. WWF was the enemy, right? And it's like, yeah, it was. So just, all that stories about that, and lots of, really interesting historical stuff. So I hope people will check out that interview, which is in issue 4 of Inside the Ropes magazine, which is out this month, and issue 5, which is out in January.
And you know what? For issue 13 of the 4 Podmen, that is us over and out as well. For Finn, for Niall, for Ian the Dynamo Kelly, and of course for the DJ Jason Kennedy. Woo! This is all we have time for this week. We hope you've enjoyed our debut show on YouTube. Until next week, we will catch you on the flip side, motherfucker.